Yeah, he had a great run, and it's fun to watch. I think I watched Indiana State and Iowa. Caitlin Clark play about the same last year.
Indiana lit up with one wild claim. Stephanie White out, Larry Bird in, Caitlin Clark stunned. If you like the Indiana Fever, hit subscribe and stay with me. A single sensational line bounced across timelines and flooded thumbnails. Bird to the Fever, Clark speechless. It spread because it felt cinematic and risky. The kind of twist that could bend a season overnight and flip the conversation in every locker room. The story offered instant conflict, a legend rumored to return and a rising star reacting in real time. People shared it because it promised consequences without needing receipts, a cliffhanger baked into a headline. Captions leaned on shock language. Creators raced to post first, and comment sections filled with fans arguing about legacy and fit. Some demanded sources. Others said the smoke was proof of a fire, and a few asked the only question that actually matters. What is confirmed today? Rumors recruit our attention because they compress complexity into a single clean sentence. They hand you a narrative with heroes, tension, and a possible turning point. Then dare you not to look away. But a team is more than a headline, and a season is more than one nameplate on a door. When a story like this detonates, it pulls focus to identity, to the style you run when the clock gets tight, and to the trust between the star on the ball and the person holding the board. The reason this rumor traveled so far is simple. It touched nerves that already existed. The debate about pace, control, and freedom in a roster that suddenly matters to the whole league. Fans want a version of Indiana that matches the speed of its new engine. They want decisive reads, crisp spacing, and fourth quarters that feel inevitable instead of careful. A legendary mentor arriving out of nowhere is the cleanest shortcut the internet can draw to reach that vision. Whether it's true or not, the reaction shows a deeper desire. People are not only hungry for shock, they are hungry for a system that fits a generational initiator, and for proof that the organization will choose bold execution over timid survival. That is why this line hijacked everyone's feed and refused to leave for days. Here's the baseline that matters, and it's simple to state. Stephanie White is the person on the sideline, and official team channels have not named Larry Bird as head coach. Rumor has heat, records have timestamps, and the difference between the two will always shape how serious people inside a locker room take a storyline. That gap is useful because it forces everyone to talk about substance instead of only talking about shock. If the viral claim is a shortcut to a dream fit, then the non-viral truth is a checklist. What style are you building? What rules define late-game decisions? And how will you scale around a star whose processing speed outpaces most coverages? Coaching is not only a title. Is a language and a set of habits that travel from practice to travel day to the last 2 minutes when nerves try to shrink the floor. When you strip away thumbnails and watermarks, got. The real work looks like this. Do 5 players share a timing vocabulary? Do they know when to lift weak side, when to ghost a screen, when to sprint into early drag to force cross matches, and when to flatten to corners to clear the lane for a downhill read? That is where a team's identity shows up. Not in announcements, but in possessions that repeat with discipline even when whistles get weird. The rumor keeps humming because the idea is electric. It promises an automatic upgrade in late-game clarity and a nostalgic bridge to Indiana history. But until a press release exists, the responsible conversation lives with what you can see today. And what you can see today is a group that must align scheme with a player who makes elite reads at speed. The task is not arguing over names. The task is choosing a pace that multiplies advantages instead of managing fear. That is how a franchise earns belief before any twist arrives. Belief grows when evidence stacks on film. When roles feel crisp, and when fourth quarters look stressful, because decisions become automatic under pressure. Recent games still show Stephanie White with the board, toggling matchups, managing runs, and deciding when to steady tempo or push pace. Whatever thumbnails suggest, the huddle's where the job lives. The camera catches shorthand cues, quick sketches of actions, and the calm that separates momentum from panic. That context matters, because the conversation that actually changes outcomes is not a nameplate controversy. It's the compatibility between a coach's teaching rhythm and Caitlin Clark's processing speed. Clark sees windows early. Her best possessions start before the defense has declared its intentions. If the playbook asks her to slow into comfort, the advantage evaporates. If the system meets her at tempo, the advantage compounds, often turning one clean read into 2 or 3 chained advantages inside the same clock. So the practical lens for every fan take is this. What does Indiana want each trip to feel like? Do they prefer controlled entries into static sets, or do they prefer flowing sequences that can morph without a reset? In film terms, that choice shows up as wide pin downs that convert into ghost actions, as early drag screens that switch responsibility before bigs are set, and as quick Spain pick-and-roll wrinkles when the clock hits the danger zone. The more fluent the group becomes in those chains, the easier it gets to manufacture premium looks late. That fluency is not romantic. It is repetition, language, and trust. Language tells 5 players when to lift, dive, or flatten. Repetition burns the timing into muscle memory. Trust lets the initiator throw a pass on a read that the receiver has not looked at yet, because both already know the picture. When you watch Indiana at its best, you see flashes of that picture. When you see stalls, you usually see spacing tighten or hesitation creep in. Fixing that is not about a poster on a wall. It's about aligning teaching tempo with star tempo until the fourth quarter feels like confirmation rather than a coin flip. That alignment is the lever that turns noise into wins. Caitlin Clark already changed the atmosphere around the franchise. Home nights stump, road games sell out, and highlight packages travel faster than recaps. Indiana jumped from watchable to must-watch in a single calendar turn. And that kind of demand rarely appears without a star who processes faster than the coverage. When a rookie tilts markets, the right response is structural. You do not paint the walls. You update the wiring. That means designing actions that reward instinctive passing, building spacing rules that hold under stress, and establishing defensive guidelines that buy back possessions when pace increases risk. It also means sharpening the organization around the edges. From player development tracks to analytics rigor to travel details that protect legs during compressed stretches. Momentum will not wait politely. It expects clarity, then execution, then repetition until the standard becomes boring and reliable. At the possession level, a weather system looks like this. Early offense to test matchups, slot cuts to punish ball watching, touch screens to force indecision, and quick seals that turn switches into high-percentage touches. At the emotional level, it looks like another thing. It looks like teammates trusting that a risky read is actually the safest option because the timing keeps help late. It looks like a crowd that rises for the second pass, not only the last shot. It looks like coaches who correct without shrinking initiative, who use film to widen a player's vision instead of narrowing it to avoid mistakes. The business side follows automatically. When the on-court product becomes a rhythm, sponsors lean in, broadcasts lean in, and youth programs fill up because the product feels like a movement, not a mood. The task for Indiana is to stabilize the gusts, make the good nights reproducible, reduce the bad nights to noise, turn the buzz into a baseline expectation that opponents respect before the opening tip. Do that, and the weather becomes climate, and climate sustains winning. Sustained winning builds habits. Habits build identity, and identity simplifies late-game choices because everyone sees the same picture at the same time. The debate that will not die is simple to state and hard to solve. Control or flow? Clark thrives on quick reads, improvisation, and pace. A safer scheme leans slower, favors clock, and punishes mistakes with immediate lessons. You see the tension in micro moments. A near triple-double, followed by a turnover, followed by a quick bench sit-down framed as a teaching point. Do you chase 0 errors, or do you accept a few loud mistakes in exchange for wins? A wave of easy points created by tempo. In modern offenses, the answer often lives in how you define acceptable risk. A live ball turnover at the top is worse than an aggressive skip that sails long. A rushed early clock pull-up can be fine if it prevents a late clock emergency. A risky pocket pass is good if it drags a helper into a foul on the next possession. The philosophy shows up on film as spacing discipline and decision windows. If spacing holds and windows stay short, reads remain clean and aggressive plays look safe. If spacing collapses and windows lengthen, the same reads look reckless. Coaches can shape that perception by emphasizing short chains, flow from a first action into a second without pausing to reset. Teach a third trigger that appears when defenders cheat the counter. Now, the star is not freelancing for chaos. She is executing a designed cascade that only looks risky because it is fast. The defensive side must match the ambition. If you push pace, and you need rules that buy back possessions, closeout standards that avoid cheap fouls, and rebound coverage that survives long misses. This is why control versus flow matters less than alignment. When alignment is real, control happens inside flow because everyone knows the same signals. Late gains then feel like confirmation, not coin flips, and the philosophy becomes a competitive edge instead of a weekly argument. Alignment also calms noise around the team because fans can predict the choices, players trust the timing, and opponents recognize a style that keeps manufacturing advantages without drama every night. Say Larry Bird, and basketball IQ enters before the door closes. 3 rings, 3 MVPs, credibility as a coach, and executive vision with Indiana roots. That resume invites faith in late-game clarity, spacing geometry, and the kind of small edges that flip playoff series. It also carries a story that fans love to tell. A legend returning to lift a rising star. The pairing writes itself in one line. Greatness meets green light. The speculation lives because it promises a shortcut from potential to inevitability. But even dream fits must survive the details that decide seasons. Would roles be defined tightly enough to reduce hesitation while keeping initiative alive? Would endgame triggers be simple, repeatable, and built to punish switches and blitzes without needing timeouts to reset? Would practices prioritize reads over plays, angles over names, and accountability over reputation? Bird's history suggests yes to a lot of those questions, because his playing and leadership careers were built on ruthless simplicity. Make the easy pass early, use space to buy time, punish help by cutting behind eyes, not into bodies. Stack small advantages until the other team surrenders to inevitability. Yet the leap from promise to plan requires collaboration. A star must feel free within rules. A staff must feel firm without becoming rigid. Veterans must hear their fingerprints in the plan so that the buy-in outruns the noise. If that ecosystem exists, a mentor with Bird's feel could accelerate clarity, not only for Clark, but for shooters, screeners, and defenders whose jobs get easier when the ball moves fast. That is the secret behind big names that work. They make everyone else's reads simpler. Shots become obvious. Rotations feel shorter. Transition defense improves because spacing decisions reduce bad crashes. The rumor sells celebrity, but the best case sells boring, repeatable excellence. If that is what people imagine when they say Bird to Indiana, the hope makes sense. Whether it ever becomes real is a different conversation entirely. Until then, the work remains aligning tempo, trust, and spacing to Clark's strengths every possession. Rumor brings clicks, results hang banners. If you like the Indiana Fever, subscribe and tell me which future you would bet on.